Welcome to the Healing Lab podcast. My name is Brian Bourgeois, and today I have a very special guest, Kyle Davis. He is a chartered psychologist, psychotherapist, mind-body specialist, executive coach, trainer, author, and the creator of the Energy Coaching. Kyle, so thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear all of your insights into the work that you do with your clients and your philosophy on healing.
It's great to be here, Brian. Thanks very much for having me. I'm out of Wales in the UK, where it rains almost all of the time. We get a little bit of sun from time to time, but it's but it's nice here. It's nice and green, and the people are friendly, so that's good.
Nice. So did you do your schooling and everything out of the UK, or where did that happen?
Yeah, no, I did. I did psychology at university for 5 years, and I've kind of stayed in the field ever since, which is a long old time now.
Awesome. So you focus on helping people with chronic fatigue, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, stress-related symptoms, burnout, and other complex mind-body health challenges. Is there a common theme that you're seeing these days that you're running across time and time again with your clients, with just how the world is evolving and with the internet, social media, AI, and all the different changes that are going on? Is there like a reoccurring theme that you've kind of noticed?
Do you know, that's a big question, and that's a great question. So I started working as a therapist probably 25 years ago. And for quite some time specialized in working with people with chronic fatigue and chronic pain conditions that from a mind-body perspective. And back in those days, 20 years ago, nobody was really interested in the whole mind-body thing. And when it came to the fact that I had a background as a psychologist, people assumed that, the mind and body are different things. So how can you talk about physical symptoms and fatigue and pain and gut problems when you come from a background of psychology? And of course, this is my view would be, but mind and body are one interconnected flowing system. So we can't just say something is psychological or physical. Now, in terms of your question, certainly, I guess one of the things that I found was that it seemed to me and my colleagues that what we encountered a lot of the time was the clients we were working with had either experienced trauma in childhood, a lot of ongoing stresses. And in kind of simple terms, it's almost as if they'd learnt that it wasn't safe to be in their body. It wasn't safe to be them. And it wasn't safe to have their feelings, their emotions. So it's almost like a protective mechanism that we have, that when things become overwhelming, we shut down the body, we shut down the feedback that we get, and then we kind of move into the head. It's, just an adaptive process. But what happens is people develop adaptive strategies in order to deal with the challenges they're facing. And that becomes very much kind of rooted in then to what I would say is a mind-based identity. So people then kind of go through life with this version of themselves, which can be somewhat disconnected or misaligned from a truer, deeper, more authentic version of them. Now, it's interesting, all the kind of stuff you brought up, talk about the craziness of the planet, technology, AI, and all of this kind of stuff. As I suppose what we've seen in the last 10 years is this rapid rate of change. And arguably, even from a human perspective, we're just not designed for that. For hundreds of thousands of years, we lived in small tribes where our life was reasonably straightforward. We were dependent on each other. We had duties to each other, and we coexisted, we connected. And of course, in the last 100 years, last 20 years, last 5 years, we're seeing this exponential rate of change within the world. And we're not really designed for that. And I think we've kind of forgotten what it's like to be human. And certainly in Western cultures, we're very head orientated. Everything's very mental. Everything is about the next thing, next thing, progress. Think your way through. You've got to know the steps. You've got to figure it out. It's all about pressure. And I think what's kind of interesting about it for me is the stresses that people are experiencing kind of exacerbates this problem of this disconnection from being human, this disconnection from the body, this disconnection from the feedback that we have. So for me, that's kind of like a primary cause. But also then we have the fact that from a medicalized perspective, despite the amazing things that medicine does, medicine invites us to look at identifying solutions for symptoms. So let's treat a symptom. And there's also the idea of let's look for the one thing. So what's causing this if we're looking for cause? But let's look for the one thing that's going to solve this problem. I guess my experience has been from the range of people that I've worked with over the years is that there's very often multiple primary causes. We can't just fixate on getting rid of the symptom, even though the symptom is very uncomfortable. Kind of one of the key principles for me is that your body is your friend. Your body is trying to communicate with you. So I always teach my clients that what seems kind of quite obvious to us now, I suppose, is that when we're experiencing a symptom or a challenge from fatigue, pain, that's when it's medically undiagnosed pain through to anxiety, depression. I view these as feedback messengers from a body that's trying to tell us that something is out of balance. So rather than just doing something to alleviate the symptoms, we need to understand what's causing those symptoms. I think the complexity within there, from what I've learned, is that it's very often the case that there are multiple primary causes, and then you get effects, which the effects in and of themselves can become causes. So, you could have somebody where sleep is a symptom or bad sleep is a symptom, and then the lack of sleep or dysregulated sleep then becomes a cause as well. So for me, whilst the kind of the challenges are complex, I think it's vitally important that we do recognize that they are complex. And this is probably why, the sorts of health challenges that we're dealing with now are so dramatically different from what our ancestors, predecessors would have dealt with, say, 100, 200 years ago, where people were dying from plagues and falling out of trees, and those sorts of things. Now, because medicine dealt with all of that just brilliantly. But now what we're facing is a plethora of these chronic health challenges. And at best, medicine tries to keep symptoms at bay. But of course, that ongoing treatment of symptoms doesn't seem to really solve the problem. And we know more about the body than ever before. We know more about healthcare. There's more therapies, there's more medicines. Yet, bizarrely, the numbers of people struggling with fatigue, pain, anxiety, depression, stress, burnout, all seem to be year on year going up. And also we're less happy than we were 50 years ago. So, it's a complex web of challenges. But for me, distilling it down to, I guess your question is, what's the common theme? I think it's disconnection from the body. It's disconnection from the physical body, disconnection from the emotional body, disconnection from the spiritual part of us as well. And when we can, the spiritual and the human part of us, and I think when we can begin to be open to the idea that, well, my body's just trying to tell me something. So rather than fight it or see myself as separate from it, if I can open up to that idea that, right, well, symptoms are messengers. They come with something useful. If I can pay attention. And from my perspective, from the mind-body perspective that I take, it's looking at those symptoms as being the result of some adaptive patterns we've had in order to manage and deal and cope with life as it presents itself.
I couldn't agree with you more with your perspective on kind of the mind-body relationship. Now, how do you go about, really, working with your clients and manifesting kind of what is actually going on in the body and how to identify, different signals that the body is giving you? Do you have an approach for that? I mean, I know there's For me, I mean, I do yoga, meditation, and a lot of these different types of things that I think help tremendously in that respect. But what is your approach for like practical things that, people at home or your clients, like that they can do to kind of develop the introspective, viewpoint of, okay, this is what's happening. I recognize this, and this is how I can, deal with it.
Uh, good question. I suppose this is what my process energy flow coaching is all about, really. Now, the at the risk of saying the most obvious thing, when I'm working with clients that may be presenting with anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, chronic fatigue, long COVID, fibromyalgia, obviously their symptoms are very, very obvious to them. And I'm looking at, in the moment, symptoms are messengers in that moment. So it's almost like the body and brain system has got to that state where, over a cumulative load of stress, and let me, before I go any further, just say just a couple of minutes on stress. Again, historically, I think we've looked at stress as being something mental. From a mind-body perspective, the stress response is largely the same, regardless of whether the stressor is physical, environmental, mental, or emotional. So there's a cumulative load. If somebody has a bad diet, is not exercising, is not sleeping well, is arguing with their boss, is people pleasing, it doesn't have good boundaries, has just had a bad case of flu. All of those things arguably are stresses on the mind body system. So that's kind of how I look at it. Is, well, there's a cumulative load. And over time, then there is an impact throughout the system. And even though most people these days talk about the nervous system and the fact that it's dysregulated, I'm not a medical doctor, but my sense is that it's probably more than that. And it's probably that there is a full system dysregulation. So it probably is the endocrine, immune, and autonomic nervous systems are all kind of out of whack. And that then creates this ripple effect throughout body and brain and the diverse range of symptoms that people experience. But of course, then when we get down to, well, how do we work with that? The first thing for me is, well, we need to understand or accept that's probably what's going on. It's not that there's one single cause. There's been this load on the system, the mind-body system, over time, which the adaptive mechanisms within body and brain can't cope with over time, and that's when it begins to break down. But then we're looking at, so the body is presenting with symptoms. So my view is that, a little bit like, you may have a person that says, well, they've had a really stressful day at work, they come home with a stress headache, and they recognize that, well, this headache is because I've had a frustrating day or a stressful day at work, or but of course, if that headache goes on for a period of time, they'd probably go to their doctor, and they would probably then maybe get some pills, whatever, maybe have some scans. But it's almost as if that intuitive understanding they have to begin with of what maybe have contributed to the symptoms in the short term kind of gets lost when the symptoms become chronic. So for me, it's bringing it back down to something quite simple and saying that, well, if we could be open to this idea that the body communicates with a degree of immediacy in the moment, yes, we know we've got a system that is dysregulated. So it's almost as if the body jumps into sending symptoms really quite quickly. But it's then translating those symptoms into, well, what actually is going on? If I'm somebody that suffering from anxiety or chronic fatigue, and I'm in Starbucks on a Thursday afternoon, and I notice an increase in my symptoms, in that moment, my body is trying to convey something to me. So I guess the approach I'm coming from is, it's almost as if the knowledge and the wisdom is within. And I'm suggesting that the thing that's led us to being out of balance in the first place, and the dysregulation in the first place, is the adaptive strategies and patterns we've implemented in how we're interacting with the world. So it's changing how we interact with the world and ourselves that ultimately alleviates the symptoms. So whilst I think that meditating and yoga and these sorts of things are good, there's something about, I think you tell me if this makes sense. I think we're in a very externally focused culture where we're looking for something outside of ourselves to fix ourselves. If there's something wrong, we go to the doctor or we seek tools, techniques, protocols, steps, whatever. And I'm suggesting, well, the information is kind of inside us because the wisdom is within there. And it's ultimately about how we are interacting with our environment. So I don't immediately jump and invite people to do yoga, even though those things are good. That's a good thing to do. It helps put people back into the body, helps them reconnect. But it's not like they have to do that. So fundamentally, I'm saying, well, yeah, if that person is in Starbucks on a Thursday afternoon and they're getting more symptoms, in that moment, their body's trying to tell them something about what's going on. And it's probably something connected to their emotion being blocked because they've learned to disconnect from that, or they've learned to disconnect from their authentic self. And a more performative version of them unconsciously is what's coming to the fore. So the journey that I take people on is help them to reconnect to the body, reconnect to that emotional part of themselves, and that kind of true self, the flow of who they are. Now, of course, that's tricky because in principle written on paper, it's pretty. But the practice is not always easy because what we're doing really is looking at somebody's identity. Because as I said before, when we go through traumas and stresses, we adapt, we implement adaptive patterns, and we're not doing that consciously. But that becomes part of our identity. So it's almost as if we have a mind-based identity where we're trying to be the strong one, the capable one, the pleasing one, the one that looks after everyone, the one who's responsible. We fulfill these roles. We take on these identities, which are not necessarily the essence of who we really are. And the journey then is kind of taken away the layers of who we're not in order for us to reveal who we are. So there's this idealistic part of me that believes it's not that people need to do meditation, yoga, breathwork, whatever. If they want to do those things, great. But it's what I want is for people to look inwards and believe that, well, actually, I am self-correcting and self-healing. So there's always, if you will, a force within me that's trying to take me back towards health, to reset me, to bring me back to balance. I just need to, I need some guidance, if you will, along the path to help me find that, to unearth that. In doing so, then that's when we can begin to understand what the patterns are, why the symptoms are there, what message they're trying to convey, and then make whatever changes we need, whether that's behavioral changes, whether that's changes in the way we're seeing the world, changes in the way we relate to ourselves. So that's the kind of principle, really. It's a little bit more inside out than outside in. And what I mean by outside in, I'm trying to encourage people to look less at tools, techniques, and whatnot. Even though I have exercises and some protocols as part of my approach, I'm really looking to empower people so that they can believe that, right, well, when I'm aligned, when I'm tuned into myself and I'm allowing my emotions, I'm witnessing them, I'm processing them, I'm acting on them when I need to. I'm speaking my own truth. I'm allowing myself to do what feels right for me. I'm meeting my needs. I'm addressing my values. When we do those things, we tend to flourish and we tend to thrive. My view is that our natural state is to flourish and to thrive. But, again, as we were saying earlier, we're living in a culture which is actually kind of working against us and it's making it harder for us to be ourselves because of the plethora of pressures and stresses to be somebody different, So, yeah, I don't know if I've explained that well, but that's kind of the method, really. It's sort of a journey back to self. That probably sounds a bit cheesy, but that's in essence what we need. And that's what my process is.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It kind of reminds me of some videos that I've watched from Alan Watts, and he talks about the same kind of thing in a similar sort of way, but he kind of relates it to frequencies and identifying and recognizing different frequencies of emotion, of, thought, feeling, and letting those frequencies play out. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling this way. Like, let's say I'm having a relapse into like some stressful thing because I got triggered. You know, let me identify it, recognize it, and let it play out. Because if you get good at this and you can allow it to just kind of run its course, he says, I don't know the science behind it, but I mean, within like, it could be, I don't know, he says 90, I think it was like 90 seconds or something like that is a common length of time. It's just like, you can really reset your nervous system by, just letting that frequency or that emotion, which is represented in a frequency, to kind of play itself out. And then you go back to your normal baseline of that non-stress state. But everyone has to deal with stress. It's just part of life, but it's how you deal with it. And if you deal with it in the wrong way, as you know, it could lead to a lot of serious issues. It could ruin your life if you deal with things the wrong way. But if you learn to kind of deal with that the correct way, in a way that works for you, everyone's different, but a way that works for you, then it's much more manageable, and you can improve and fix a lot of the things non-invasively, without a lot of like getting on antidepressants and getting on all these drugs that typically make things worse, if not better for most people, I think. And then also have a lot of side effects that are not very good. What is your perspective on that? Am I kind of getting that sort of right, of like kind of what you were talking about? Or
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of interesting things out of that. So the first part for me is that if, say, we're talking about people that are struggling with some chronic symptoms, be that chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, anxiety, there is a chance that they're, through an adaptive process of a kind of a survival protective mechanism, those individuals, to some extent, will have tuned out from the body and from emotions. So the step one is actually getting people back into the body so that they can begin to feel those. Then you come on to, I guess, the next phase, which is then being able to allow emotion. And, I agree with everything you said there. The challenges, I feel, are that there's almost something instinctive about resisting emotion. So people generally feel that emotion is bad for them. They're going to drown in it if they let themselves feel it. That's a very common experience. People don't want to feel, negative or uncomfortable feelings, because at some level they'll relate it to me. I don't want to be the kind of person that feels this. And then there's the thing that we learn as kids, which is, well, there's nothing I can do about it anyway. So it's quite a journey, really, to begin to allow emotion, because often what happens is there's kind of two main things, is that people either suppress it, and they'll usually do that unconsciously, or they'll destructively express it. So that could be being aggressive when you experience anger, and that a destructive expression can be external in terms of acting out, or you internalize it and you kind of go in on yourself and brutalize yourself. So the journey of even just beginning to open up to emotion, and for me, what I talk to clients about, it's like trying to create a gap between something happens and you feel emotion, and very often instinctively we either suppress or we destructively express. What we want to do is open a bit of a gap where, when we allow and we witness. So what I encourage my clients to do is be both in their body so that they can experience the sensations of what they're having, but also witness it so they don't collapse into it. They're the observer of the experience. They're not the experience itself. When we can kind of occupy those two spaces, it creates the opportunity to have this gap. And when we allow, as you said, it often is, it's a common idea that's talked about. It's the impact of an emotion in the moment normally lasts about 90 seconds. So if you can allow something And if you're in your body and witness the sensations without trying to escape it, without trying to resist it, without judging yourself, without looking for meaning about you in it, then it can begin to move. And I think from there, the other bit in relation to what you said is, for me, there's a wisdom. The wisdom is identifying, when do I just need to feel this and allow this to move through me, as opposed to when do I need to take action? Because there are times that maybe I've got to put a boundary in place. It maybe I've got to say no. It maybe I've got to take some action that addresses my needs or values. So there will be times when our emotion is, it's feedback about our interaction with our environment, and it's inviting us to take some action. As I said, for me, the wisdom and what I do with clients a lot of the time is identifying, well, when do I need to take, once I've allowed myself to have the experience of the sensations of emotion as they present in my body, when do I need to take action? When do I just need to let it move through me? And it will move through me. And yeah, it is a frequency thing, isn't it? Because there seems to be something that we, for some reason, need to be able to feel and allow our emotion. There's something, for whatever reason, that seems destructive to our system about suppressing it. I think if essentially that activates a stress response, and then the system is acting as if there's something wrong. And that connects to, people say, well, how does stress cause illness? Well, effectively, if our stress response is activated, the body-brain system is responding as if it's under threat, because it's working extremely hard then to identify the threat and then pull us back into balance. But if it doesn't identify anything, it can get stuck in that stress mode, and therefore it's almost like, if you were to think of a cruise ship, and the captain of the ship, he's sat in his office, and he's got all the screens in front of him, and then there's some feedback from deep down below in the ship that says there's a leak, and he sends everybody down, the engineers, the bar staff, the guys working in the restaurant, everyone goes down to fix this leak. If they can't find a leak and they're in there for a long period of time, nobody's serving drinks, nobody's making beds, nobody's doing the maintenance tasks needed, and things go wrong. And it's a simple analogy, but I think for me, it kind of makes sense for how stress can potentially lead to disease in the body, is that when the stress response is activated, everything is working really hard to try to address and get the system to rebalance by identifying some threat. But it means all the other maintenance tasks are not taken care of, and that's when problems seem to happen. So that's kind of, for me, how stress hits the body. In terms of that emotional piece, I think it's actually a lot harder than many people think to really fully allow the emotions that we have. Because we tend to block them up, and we also get stuck in our head. And there's a whole other thing with that as well.
Yeah. So do you kind of typically run across like a few different areas that are causing kind of imbalance with the stress for people, or how they're dealing with it? Like, for example, like one thing could be like diet, another like maybe a poor diet that's causing just negative effects on you, poor sleep, not getting enough oxygen when you're sleeping. It could be exercise related or environmental type related. How do you approach that with your clients and kind of delve into that? Because obviously, if you are like not getting good sleep, because like that's kind of one of the things that the Da Vinci orthopedic pillow does, is it like completely opens up your airways for people that snore, and it dramatically changes people's lives, because not only do they feel energized, they don't disturb their partner. If you snore, it could lower testosterone. There's all these it could cause all these really negative side effects if it's not treated for decades and decades, and you're having hundreds of mini strokes a night. That's going to have an effect on your stress, and it's going to lead to other health issues, whether that's sleep, whether that's like, diet or what have you, right?
Yeah, and this is, I think you've highlighted here the complexity of the picture, and it's why it's difficult to treat complex health challenges. My view of it is, I guess there's two things. I suppose the first thing up front is, obviously I'm a psychologist and I have moved into the mind body world. So I'm viewing things through a particular lens. With all of my clients, I will talk about diet, exercise, sleep, but I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not an academic sleep expert. I'm not a personal trainer. I've got some rudimentary knowledge on those things, but I'm very aware of the impact of those things. So that's the first bit. I think the second bit for me is that because everybody's body is different, it's only when we work with the individual that we can ascertain what the biggest stressor is. Going back to what I was saying at the start, in terms of multiple primary causes and then downstream effects and then effects becoming causes, that's where things I think are challenging, is because you could have somebody that their system is stressed for whatever reason, and the result is poor sleep, and that then becomes a cause in itself. Or it could be that there is some problem with there's a structural problem which is leading to poor sleep, and then that's leading to other stresses. So it's trying to identify what exactly is going on is not always easy. I suppose what I often find is that many people come to work with me will have done a lot of work on diet and nutrition. They will have done a chunk of work on sleep. They'll probably be looking at exercise if they're able to do that. And I suspect because those things historically have been talked about more and they are probably a little bit more tangible. I'm working with the deeper stuff. I'm working with emotion, the kind of spiritual part of a person, their identity, and it's a little bit more nebulous. It's not so easy to work with that deeper stuff. For me, obviously, that stuff is core. It's fundamental, and the people that are drawn to work with me, that's what those are the challenges they're facing. If somebody had a chronic health challenge and they initially did some nutritional work and they found that alleviated their symptoms, then they don't need to come to see me. So I don't have a record of those people, obviously. I'm dealing with the people that have done the other work, or maybe they haven't done the other work, but they recognize that emotional identity, deeper self, spiritual part is what needs to be sorted out.
Okay, yeah, no, totally. So do you, what is your, perspective on any type of, medicinal treatments or prescription, or do you ever delve into, I know you deal with like trauma stuff and like depression, anxiety. Psilocybin's been kind of on the news lately, and there's some different reports of that being potentially effective for, just reworking the neurotransmitters in the brain and depression and anxiety, or just some even like ketamine therapy where they kind of do that out of body experience that's administered by a psychiatrist. Do you ever work with that, or what is your thoughts on that? It's like, basically all natural, or do you think there's a place for that maybe for some people potentially, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? I think that what we've experienced probably in the last 5-10 years is a surge of academic interest in well-being related areas. And it's one thing I've found is that, it's a challenge to keep up with everything that's going on. I'm working in the field, but trying to keep up with all the latest ideas and research is tricky. And of course, like with all things when it comes to academic research, is that there are theories are tested. Some people subscribe to theories, other people will refute them. And then we'll get other studies that will either confirm or refute. So for me, we're in a continual state of flux and evolution, and we've got to make the best with what we've got at the moment. I suspect that, the area of psychedelics may prove extremely valuable for some people. I'm not an expert and it's not something that I do, but I'm very aware of it. But it seems to me to be probably reasonably early days. But I've little doubt that, like many things, it will have its place. I'm always very cautious about looking at something as being a miracle cure for all people, because I'm just very conscious of the complexity of individuals and the complexity of problems. So, and of course, this is why we've got so many healthcare options, and different things do seem to work for different people. But yeah, I'm little doubt there's value in those things.
So that you offer the energy flow coaching program, and you've written a book published by W. Norton, The Intelligent Body. Now, if someone was going to work with you for the energy flow coaching, what does that look like for somebody? Like, how do you approach that? What is the process that you go through to identify and evaluate and come up with type of a program? And how long does it typically take for somebody to kind of start seeing results?
So I work with really quite a broad range of people. I work with people that are chronically ill, but I also work with executives and professionals who are struggling, maybe they're burnt out. So the process can vary a little bit. But energy flow coaching, I guess, is more of a framework, and it's underpinned by certain principles. And the principles are that symptoms are messengers, your body is your friend, you're self-healing and self-correcting. We need to pay attention, and we need to translate our experiences in a way that enables us to understand that we probably have some adaptive patterns that need to be altered. So there's that's the kind of the general theory that I'm working from. I think that very often it's the case that when people have a health challenge, it's obviously viewed as a problem. And in many instances, the attempted solutions that we have, as well as a fear of the problem and the symptoms, can keep us locked in place. So, to give a simple analogy, a little bit like if your car is in a muddy field, you instinctively press the gas pedal and of course your wheels spin. I think what we do as human beings very often is we keep our foot on that gas pedal without really realizing that's what we're doing. So part of what I try to do is identify what are the obstacles in the way? What are the things that are preventing us from flowing? What are the things that are preventing us from getting in touch with our true self? What are the things potentially that I'm currently doing to improve my situation that might be making it worse? We generally tend to do more to try to fix ourselves. And in many instances, the doing more and trying to fix ourselves actually can make us worse, or best hold the problem in place. So, the way I talk to clients is to say, right, well, we're going to be approaching this like building a puzzle. There's not going to be one single thing that we do. But what we will need to do on the journey is come out of the head, reconnect with the body, uncover what our deeper patterns are, what our adaptive strategies are, and then begin to, through interpreting the messages that come through the body, identify what it is we need to put in practice. But, as I say, that's very simple. You asked how long it takes. That really kind of varies. I usually work with people over 3 months or 6 months. It all depends on the challenges a person faces, or the kinds of health challenge they have, and maybe even how long they've been struggling with that health challenge. Because I've worked historically with lots of people where their lives have been dramatically impacted by a health challenge, and they need to be coached, if you will, back to creating a new life for themselves. If there's somebody that hasn't worked for a period of time and they spend a lot of time at home, then we've got it's building a life. But it's building a life from a new version of them, which I would say is a more aligned, authentic version of them. So it's very much underpinned by science, nervous system stuff, polyvagal theory, the latest neuroscience on uh, the predictive processing of the brain, and understanding kind of how symptoms are created. But it's also overlaid with this kind of spiritual aspect, which is self-healing, self-correcting. There's a true self within us. We're designed to flow. We're designed to flourish. So I kind of dovetail those two things because I think it's important that people can understand, well, what actually is going on in my body and brain? What's holding me back? Because ultimately what I'm looking to do is empower people so they can understand themselves. They can understand what's giving rise to the experience that I'm having, whether that's an experience of symptoms or whether it's that I'm feeling kind of lost, stuck, or overwhelmed. And I want to be performing better at work, or I want to be feeling better. I want to be a better father, a better mother, a better partner. So it's identifying, well, what might be getting in the way. And as I say, very often that's patterns, strategies that we've put in practice. Some of that can be behavioral. Some of it can be narrative stories and beliefs that we're carrying about who we are. So effectively what I'm doing is laying all that out on the table. We're unpicking. It's almost like we're playing detective to some extent by trying to understand, what are the things that are getting in the way? What are the things that are holding us back? And then what can we do about them?
So tell us, how practically do you go about identifying these areas and helping people identify for themselves? Is it like journaling? Is it psychotherapy sessions that you're like asking questions? Is there some other type of like process that kind of facilitates to try to find, the underlying causes of stress or trauma or, inefficiencies in someone's life? Or, how do you kind of go about that? If I'm okay, this all makes sense, but what does it really look like in practice for somebody?
Well, I suppose go back to what I was saying earlier. If somebody's got physical symptoms or emotional symptoms, then when we can frame it from a perspective, right, well, that's my body trying to tell me something. When we identify those, then practice, there's a series of practices, but it's not steps 1 to 10 because everybody is different. So you mentioned journaling and various things, and yeah, there may be elements of that depending on what people need. But it's if a person is experiencing challenges of any sort, well, they'll probably know where those challenges are, and those challenges will be held in place by one of two things, in my view. There will be historical elements. But again, because I'm not looking for single cause, I do get people that will call me and say, I've got these problems now in my life, and I think this is caused by what happened in my childhood. And if I can sort that or come to terms with that, everything will be fine. And in my view, it's, well, that it may be that there was something that happened in childhood that created an adaptive pattern, but that adaptive pattern has become part of identity now, and it will be something that's reinforced now. So it may be that we need to do so. There'll be some clients that we'll go back and we'll look at what went on in the past, and we'll work with different parts, the younger parts, the inner child, and do elements of that. But there may be some people, they don't need to work with stuff in the past. It's actually what's holding the problem in place is that they're still implementing the same adaptive pattern from the past, which is very often connected to a blocking of self. So we're essentially using the symptoms or the challenges or the obstacles as the spotlight and say, okay, well, this is where I've got a problem. This is where this is showing up for me. And then from there, it's all right, well, what's holding that in place? Where might that have come from? What do we need to do? What needs to change? Is it that it's a behavioral change? Is it that actually I'm doing this because I'm carrying some antiquated narrative or story of the world or people or myself? So what do we need to change within that can help me navigate through this? So it's using problems and symptoms, but in terms of I guess you're kind of asking about tools and techniques. I suppose the thing is, as I was saying earlier, the energy flow coaching idea, it's a framework, and I'm trying to get people away from a dependency on tools and techniques, because I think, as I was saying earlier, as a very externally focused culture, I think people do become very dependent on that. I very often have people say to me, should I meditate? Should I do yoga? And my answer is always, well, if you feel drawn to doing those things, that's great. But it comes from a very mind orientated place where you're believing that, well, I should do that. And because if you then miss your yoga for a day, you think, oh my God, I've missed my yoga, I'm going to have problems again. So I don't want people to have dependencies on kind of tools, techniques, and protocols. What I want them to be open to is that, okay, there's a broader framework here where I need to be out of my head a bit. I need to reconnect with my body, because we spend far too much time in the head. I need to get into more of a body-based identity, a kind of a true self-identity, rather than this mind-ego-based self that's been running the show. And there are, I get people to, I do breath work with people, I do journaling with people, a very specific variety, but only as and when needed. I certainly get people to document when they have symptoms. Me given the example of Thursday afternoon in Starbucks, I'd want somebody to document that. I'd want to know what's the context within within which that symptom is arising. I'd want to then work out, well, what's going on? What emotions might be present? To what extent is that person blocking their true self? Because when we can begin to do that in a very practical way, then we can begin to look at what needs to happen. But I try to keep techniques as such to a minimum. I always get people to do little exercises, but it's very, that can be bespoke for the person. It could be I'll have a client and I say, right, well, this is what's come up this week. This is what we've learned from your experiences, your symptom experiences, or your challenges this week. It might be useful to put this little exercise into practice. But that can vary from person to person. That's why I say there's a broader framework which is kind of underpinned more by kind of ideas and principles, that it is, right, well, this is your steps 1 to 10 that you need to do. I do appreciate as well, Brian, in saying that, is, what people very often want is, well, just give me the steps 1 to 3, go away and do it. And for me, it's not quite as easy as that. Because on paper, it's very simple. Well, I just connect with my body, connect with my feelings. I let myself be guided by what feels right for me. Yeah, on paper, that's easy, or that's simple. But to put it into practice, particularly when I've been detached from myself and I've been living in a kind of a mind-ego-based identity, there's layers we've got to work through to get rid of that and to reconnect. So the journey of reconnection, realignment, it'll be slightly different for most people, but there is a core of re-engaging with the body, re-engaging with emotions, with gut feelings, with intuitions, with the deeper knowing and wisdom that we have, and it's being guided by that. What I'm aiming for with people as I work with them is that they have realizations and insights about themselves between the sessions. As very often people will come into a session with me and say, God, this happened this week. I had this incredible realization about something, and I can see what I've been doing here, or I can see how I'm seeing myself here. I think I've always done that, and I can see how that's holding me back. So that's really what I'm looking for, is to create an environment where people can evolve and develop through self-awareness and insight into themselves and the nature of all that is, so that they can make better choices for themselves.
Yeah, that's some deep stuff for sure. And what I'm kind of gathering, and you can tell me what your thoughts on this, but like kind of what I keep on going back to is two things. One is living in the present, helping your clients live in the present and not live in the past with all the problems that happened in the past, and not worrying about the future with all the problems that, most of those problems don't even exist or won't even, come about, because it just, it's just worrying about something. But it's like, I'm here now. I'm present. I'm living in the moment, and I can kind of, take all this stress and external, minutia just away and focus on me, focus on my mind, focus on my body. And as you were saying, they could have they could have a, I don't know what you basically they could, your clients could, come up and say, oh, I've had this different, idea of like, okay, this is what I need to change. This is what's been going on. I kind of see it clearly now. And it's kind of taking the lens that you look at the world, a paradigm shift that maybe has been misaligned in the past, and you are redeveloping that, recreating that paradigm to have it align, with you, have it work for you instead of against you, because you are seeing the world from a different lens, and the way that you were seeing the world was not the correct way to view it. Like this if this thing occurs, then I have to do that or something like that. But that's not always the case, because this thing could occur, but there's 20 other things that you could probably do, and a lot of those things are bad and a lot of those things are good, and you could choose the good options, and then be just as happy and happier longer term with those decisions.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot in there, Brian. I mean, the first thing you talked about was effectively mindfulness and being present. And as I was saying earlier, I always talk to clients about pieces of a puzzle. And it's without doubt, we live in this very mind orientated culture where people spend a lot of time in their head. As you rightly say, they're jumping between future, past. So pulling people into the present is incredibly important, and can be very difficult to do as well. I think as well, what goes with that, it can be useful to be mindful of, well, we are experiencing an internally generated reality. So we're not seeing the world as it is. We are seeing the world as we are. And of course, if you're dealing with people that have been through traumas or prolonged stress, and their systems are dysregulated, that will impact how they see themselves and the world. That's where they can get locked in that. So there's definitely work that will need, another piece of the puzzle is for people to learn how to cultivate safety within. As I said right at the start, it's very often the case in terms of simplistic patterns that people learn that it's not safe for me to be me. It's not safe for me to be in my body. It's not safe for me to feel my feelings. And therefore, if you will, the metaphorical shifting into the head. So people do need to learn to be present in their body, which can be difficult when the body has historically been overwhelming. People do need to recognize that their experience in the now is, if you will, this internally generated reality. Because of the predictive processing nature of the brain, we're likely to see things in a similar way until we make some changes, or until we have something that shunts us out of that. But there's definitely a piece of the puzzle, which is learning to regulate, learning to cultivate safety within, and then learning that it's okay for me to feel my feelings. It's okay for me to be me. But that's a baby stepping process. But yeah, it's a big bit of me learning to be present with me. And of course, again, living in a culture where we're continually distracted, where it's a very dopaminergic society we're living, isn't it? Where we're looking at the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And I'm not saying that people need to sit around all day attuned to themselves, but I think we do need to get some sort of balance where we've forgotten to be human because everything is on the go and we're always distracting ourselves. We're always ultra busy. And even that ultra busyness keeps us locked in a mobilized, always on state, and doesn't, from the scientific perspective, doesn't give us that opportunity to oscillate between a relaxation mode or a rest and digest mode, as they say, and that mobilized on doing it, getting things done mode. So I think it's vitally important that we cultivate that self-awareness, because for me, when we have more self-awareness, clarity, and it increases the opportunity for choice. I think when we're in a very dysregulated state, very often we're just reacting and responding to life through a lens of threat and stress, which can become a perpetuated reality for us. So, there's inherent complexity in there. But I think, as you rightly say, coming back, learning to be present, learning to attune, kind of, for me, they're vital cogs.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm hearing that you have kind of, or correct me if I'm wrong, two sort of categories of clients. Typically, one would be dealing with individuals that may have, like chronic pain or dealing with, just life events. And then another, which would be more on like the business coaching, corporate kind of coaching for like executives or like athletes even, or just other professionals. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Kind of, you have two different kind of.
Yeah, I guess you could. It sort of falls into two strands. I'll work with people with a health challenge, and then
Mhm.
people that don't necessarily have a health challenge. It's very often the case, even those that don't have a health challenge that want to improve. There's obviously there are things that are holding them back. And again, in those instances, it's very often people get stuck in stories and beliefs and ideas and narratives in their head. So the principle of returning to self and letting yourself out is still utterly vital. But certainly, I find a lot with working with executives and professionals who are maybe overwhelmed, maybe they feel lost, maybe they feel stuck. It's very often an identity piece that they've been fulfilling this role or a number of kind of mind-based roles, and they've become disconnected. So, in those instances, we're not working with symptoms. Symptoms are not presenting themselves, but challenges are. And as you say, when I'm working with somebody with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression, there's very evident symptoms there. And, I guess there are different things that we need to work with, but the fundamental principles of the work are largely the same. And it is that reconnection with a deeper sense of self and identifying the mind-based identities that have been and patterns that are holding us back.
Yeah, no, it kind of clicked for me there. uh,
I hope that answers the question.
it kind of clicked for me there that i I'm hearing that a lot of the, like, especially maybe like the coaching or the like coaching clients that you have that are, just in a situation with their work or with their life, or whatever. Do you find it like primarily an identity issue? Like, for example, you have people very common that are, come to you, and then you look at everything, and like you just see that they're having all these issues or whatever the issues they're having because they're living a different identity than they actually are. Like they've developed a life that may not be themselves through whatever reason of all this,
Yeah, I suppose part of the thing is I'm saying that when somebody, I'm not suggesting for a second that there's a single version of any of us. What the science will tell us is there is no one version of us. But what I guess from a more spiritual perspective, is saying, well, there's a deeper wisdom, there's an essence within all of us. And something seems to happen that when we can align and connect with that, we just get better ideas. Our decisions are better, we're more creative, we're just kind of smarter about life, but we make choices, decisions, take actions that seem to be better for us. So I think that, as you were talking, what kind of came to mind is that you said, do I always address things from the level of identity? Well, I guess what I'm looking for is a deeper transformation for people. So if I had somebody that came to me, a guy at work or a lady at work, that said, my time management is all over the place, a transactional approach would be to talk about productivity hacks, time management tools, and whatnot. I'm more interested in who is the person, which version of you is showing up that's creating this problem for yourself. Problem, if we're viewing it as a problem. And what do we need to understand about that version of you, and how detached from the core of you is that version of you? Why is this a problem? But understanding how, and it could well be that that person is trying to please, is trying to meet the others, is meet the needs of others, is having expectations or meeting expectations potentially that they may have come from themselves, but they may have learned from somebody else. So it's for me, it's important that when people can attune to that deeper wisdom, they get clarity, and with clarity comes ideas, comes that creativity, that insight, that wisdom, which gives them the chance. I can see what's going on here. I can see what I need to do, and if they can't see it, usually I can see it, and then I'll offer them something. But yeah, so in terms of that identity bit, for me, I suppose I am looking at, most of the time, I'm looking at something a little bit deeper, really, because I want something to be lasting for somebody. I want somebody to have that self-knowledge. If they've got a problem over here, if they've got that self-knowledge and understanding of themselves, and they can access their wisdom, it means, well, if another problem arises, they know how to access. Rather than if it's a little bit more transactional, I'm giving somebody some tools and techniques. It maybe they'll do them for a while and they'll stop, or it maybe the problem just occurs somewhere else because they haven't addressed what the real issue is underneath. So for me, getting to the kind of the core of it, and I'm not suggesting there's one single cause, but getting to the core of it and helping people access their own wisdom is vital.
Amazing. So, Kyle, how can listeners find out more about you? I'm going to include all of your links and to your book and to your coaching program, but how can they find more about you if they're interested in learning more about you and your programs?
So the websites are energyflowcoaching.com and energyflowbusiness.com. Yeah, you can find my book, The Intelligent Body, on Amazon, and I write for Psychology Today as well, so you can see me there. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the social platforms.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much. That was extremely interesting conversation. I think it was very valuable and a lot of great new ideas.